Hello, good morning. So it is time for a new history topic, which I am still sticking with the witch hunt trials that swept across the continent of Europe and the American colonies. The last few weeks, I've been discussing why the witch hunt started and how it formed during the Protestant Reformation, and that it was a genocide because women were the primary targets. This week, I wanted to expand my research to include society, religion, and politics, and what kind of role they played during the witch hunts and before the witch hunts. This week, we used the America History and Life with Full Text database to find sources. The database is helpful if you have access to it because it does have primary and secondary sources. Like one of my sources I'm using is pamphlets in England, which is very helpful. The other two are secondary, but still helpful as well. Like I said in a previous discussion, secondary is always helpful to back up the primary source because it makes you think about other viewpoints might have that's different from your own, right? So, my first source, The Devil's Special Instruments, Women and Witchcraft Before the Great Witch Hunts, is important because it doesn't just discuss how women were the main targets, but it goes into explaining the stigma surrounding women and why they were tied to witchcraft. It started through religion, an act that was passed into law in the year 1563, which was before the witch hunts. The other two sources I have describe politics and religion and events that took place in England and Salem. I wanted to use sources from both continents, the American colonies and England, to show how closely related the witch hunts were connected. The sources show how religion and politics played its role, but also explained a strained relationship between the American colonies and England at that time. It's important to know that the witch trials did take place through Puritan established areas, which ties back to the previous discussion on how it originated and why. We need to remember that the Protestants did, in Scotland, did start the witch trials due to not wanting any more women leaders, and that was their way to get rid of that. Um, the Salem the Salem source is good because it pinpoints exactly the events that happened in Salem, and it describes how their trial was a little bit different than what happened in England because of their conflict that they was having with England at that time, and their witch hunts, whereas they was similar, it did cause a lot of stress between England and the colonies. And then the England source is important because that's the primary source. It's the pamphlets, and it was depicting women and how women were viewed at that time, how politics and religion looked at women. It would show pictures of ugly women, it normally poor, battered women. Like the witch trials, they used certain types of women, like widowed, um, poor, just and sometimes ugly. Not all the women were ugly. Some of them were wealthy, but the majority of it was poor women and women who really couldn't um, defend themselves, or the society frowned upon them because they was different and they just didn't tie into what society wanted at that time. So we need to be mindful of that when we're looking at the pamphlets. They are primary and they're important, but it's also what society sees. So they, like media today, it's the same as back then. It's not always like complete honesty because it wasn't just poor ugly women, and some of the pictures that they put in the pamphlets it's not always an accurate description because some of the women were wealthy as well, and that was also within the source that was in my English one.